People are always asking, when is the collapse coming? And I have to suggest to everyone that the collapse is on right now. We are not going to see things happen overnight. It's a slow and steady decay. But when you try and talk to people you thought were, let's say smart or with it, and they have no idea what's going on in the world, the reality. They have no idea. These people may be in your family, they may be co-workers, but you try and have a simple conversation with people, explaining the truth, and their version of reality is so far from yours that it becomes very difficult, impossible, in fact, to get your information from your brain into theirs. It's simply not going anywhere. It's probably actually making things worse. I've encountered this so many times, and even still, I've had to deal with this countless times. I'm still frustrated by it. And I know a lot of individuals have brought this up to me before, that they have a family member who they were talking to, and for example, the unemployment rate. And the individual will say, I'm employed, everything is just fine. But that's not the truth. I just did a video about how 1 in 6 young men are either jobless or in jail. Now, what does that tell you about the reality of the situation? But of course, these people who may at this time be employed are not able to see this truth. So let's look at some other statistics which should help out our case. One of them is the civilian labor force participation rate. That is key. That's what you need to mention to people. Don't look at the unemployment rate. You can tell them, look at the civilian labor force participation rate. And this is the actual amount of people employed. That's one thing to use. And of course, we can get into other indicators. For example, the inflation rates. Inflation rates we know are not real because they're able to manipulate them. And that's public fact. They can use the CPI numbers and choose what makes up the basket of goods. So, for example, if beef becomes too expensive, they say the individual will then go to ground beef. And then if, for example, that ground beef is too expensive, then they'll go down to Spam or whatever. That's the way they choose to use these numbers. One good resource being shadow stats. So you've heard that before. One of the things that I would suggest people do is not try and change the mind of somebody else. In fact, we need to slowly pull them in the direction gently. You don't want to force it because people will simply push away. And I know myself, been there 100 times. So what I would suggest to close off this video is to gently approach the situation. For example, if you are trying to get across the fact that the banking system is unsafe, would you go ahead and tell them right off the bat, look, everything's all corrupt, these bankers are liars, they're stealing all our money, this and that, and you start throwing these facts in their faces, a lot of times they get frightened. They don't know what to do. They have so much money perhaps invested into these banks, whether it's their savings, whether it's in mutual funds or stocks or anything else. They're going to get freaked out and they're going to put up their defense system. So what I would suggest you do is take a lighter approach. And that is something along the lines of, I've researched a little bit. I saw an article in the newspaper and it said that of course you mentioned the insurance that's in your country. For example, the CDIC, the FDIC, whatever it is. And you could say, I read that they only have an extremely small percentage of insurance available on the deposits. In fact, if just one bank went down, they would be unable to support that bank. That's really interesting. And it just frightens me a little bit. I'm really not comfortable leaving so much of my money in the banking system. And then you start having a conversation. So you're not suggesting anything to them, you're not frightening them, you're basically expressing your own concerns, and they may ask more questions. And you just give just a little bit at a time. You may know 100 things, but you just give them one thing. And they may not ask anything else, and that's it. So the conversation ends there, but tomorrow there may be something else, and the next day and the next day. And that's the way we have to do this. And other people may be listening in, and they may ask questions, and that's the way we need to approach this, gentle and simple. And I hope you do appreciate these kind of tips, this kind of information. So please go ahead and spread the word of truth. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Check out my website, of course, themoneygps.com, where I've got the free e-course where everyone can learn a thing or two. Take care.